We're going to get started in just a couple minutes. Just getting the YouTube going. It's taking a long time today. All right. Sorry for the delay. We're going to get started now. This is a class on property taxes. And I'm going to share my screen so everyone can follow along on their screens. And if a reminder, if you're in the room here, please mute your speaker since we can't project this on the big screen today. Understanding property taxes. This is a very important subject because our buyers are very concerned about it, and it affects our monthly payments, property taxes, and property taxes are very expensive. So we're going to talk about it. The first thing I wanted to say is that you guys are not CPAs. And so you can talk about property taxes in a general kind of way, but you cannot answer specific tax questions. And so you don't want to answer specific tax questions. If a client says, how does this affect my income taxes or my specific scenario you can't answer that. You want to refer them to a CPA. But if they have a general question around property taxes and how it works, to the extent that you take this class and experience doing transactions, it can be very helpful knowledge as a general thing. Does that make sense? All right. So I'm grateful that 3 of you are here. Is there any specific questions, the folks in the room, that you wanted to learn about property taxes today? Anything specific, any specific subject? Just general? Okay. All right. So here's what we're going to do. First, I'm going to discuss how property taxes actually work, the mechanism of it. It's very complicated. Then we're going to talk about where you get information about property taxes. Where does it come from? Then I'm going to tell you how to calculate expected property taxes for your transactions that you're going to do. Then we'll talk about why how to figure out the importance of that value. So you're going to figure out the expected property taxes. Why? What does it mean? What does the value actually mean? And how is it important for your buyers? Then we're going to talk about supplemental property taxes, transfer taxes, Prop 19, and hopefully we'll still have time for questions at the end. Does that sound good? All right. So property taxes. In California, every county assesses a tax on people who own real property. That could be land or property built on the land. All of it, every single one of them, is potentially subject to property taxes that are administered by the county. So Santa Clara County does all the property taxes for people who have property in that county, but someone just over the county line in San Mateo County will have San Mateo County managing the property taxes. So it's not based on the city, it's not based on the state, it's based on the county. Property taxes in California were completely changed in the early 70s by something called Prop 13. Is anyone here familiar with Prop 13? You are. Prop 13 basically said we are going to restrict how much counties can increase property taxes each year on both residential and commercial property. Okay. So nowadays, as a result of Prop 13, taxes for property are based on 2 values. The first value is called the ad valorem fee. Ad valorem, anyone know what that means? According to value, that's right. The second part of property taxes is something we call the direct assessment fee. Okay, and that is in addition to the ad valorem fee. And I'm going to walk you through all of it. Property taxes have specific, consistent timelines and due dates. Every year it's going to be the same everywhere in the state, even though it's administered at the county level. And if you borrow money from a lender, if your clients borrow money from a lender to buy their home, they may choose to have their lender pay their property taxes for them. That is something called an impound account. It is like a little mini escrow. And it sits, this account, this impound account, the lender manages the payments of the property taxes to the county on behalf of the borrower. Why would the lender want to manage the money? Why would the lender have any interest in managing the borrower's payments of property taxes? Yes, absolutely. So that they never get into a situation, the borrower, where they have a tax default or a lien of taxes against the property, which would hurt the lender's interest in the property. Remember, the lender has a high financial interest, bigger than the buyer in most cases. If your buyer puts down 20%, the lender's interest is 80%. They don't own the property, but they certainly have a pretty strong financial incentive to make sure you're paying your property taxes. If a borrower puts down less than 20%, then they often are required to have one of these accounts. It's not even optional. Yeah, the impound account is not optional when the borrower is sometimes not optional, when the borrower is putting down less than 20%. Compulsory. Yeah, but there's some variation. Sometimes it's 10%. But the important thing is that the lender may require it. Even lenders who do 20%, even borrowers who don't have it required may choose to do it. Why would a borrower want the lender to pay their property taxes instead of doing it themselves? Get rid of the hassle. Yes, you're a good student. You have all the right answers. Yes, to get rid of the hassle. It is so much easier, especially a first-time buyer who maybe they're not great with money. Maybe they don't have the most analytical mind, for the lender to take care of it for them. They just give the lender a little bit more each month in the check they give them for the loan. So that's why. All right. Does this all make sense? Okay. Let's talk about this ad valorem tax a little bit more. So we talked about ad valorem meaning according to value. It is by far the largest portion of the tax, right? If the tax is $10,000, probably at least 8,500 of it is ad valorem. It's almost always, at least for residential property, at least 1.1% of the sale price. So if you have a $1 million sale price, that's $11,100, right? I think that's right. 1%, 1 million, then 100,000 is 10%, then 10,000 is 1%. Yeah, it would be $11,000, right? Not 11,100, 11,000 even. But that's just an example. We're going to do some numbers, so we'll look at it on our screens, right? But that's a lot of money, right? Okay. Now, what are these direct assessments I was talking about? This is the second part of it. So counties began to discover very quickly in the 70s, when this all started, that they didn't have enough money for their fire departments. They didn't have enough money to keep the street lights lit. They didn't have enough money to pay for the sewers. Do you have a question? Yeah. Yeah. 1.1% of the value of the property. Is this national? No, it varies by neighborhood. So yeah, it varies and varies and varies. So 1.1 is a minimum. Okay, so we'll look at a specific example. You can research what the actual percentage is for any property you look at. But county administers it. But each property will have its own direct assessment number. Okay? Anyway, so the counties found they didn't have enough money. So they started passing bond measures. When we vote every 4 years or every 2 years, we often are asked to pass bond measures and tax measures. They want more money for the schools, or they want more money to fix the roads, or whatever it is. And those are often paid for by property owners. Renters pay it too, because their rent will go up. But typically property owners get assessed a special assessment of either a flat rate per year or percentage based on the value of the house, whatever it is, the property. So these special assessments are called direct assessments, and they sometimes go right down to the neighborhood. Okay. Like in Marina Bay in Richmond, they have a redevelopment fee that applies to half of the condos there. And that is very neighborhood specific and increases their property taxes there. And there are neighborhoods like that all over the Bay Area. Sometimes, if a developer has a certain arrangement when they build a subdivision, they have additional taxes called Mello-Roos taxes that are on top of another direct assessment. So
they range from for a particular period of time, let's say 10 years or 20 years, or they are lifetime like an advert?
They are typically lifetime and they just go up. You rarely see them disappear from property. In fact, there's been real tax, what we call tax creep, right? Back in the 70s, the 1.1% was more and more consistent. But now, because of all these local special assessments, many people's percentage is much higher than 1.1. It's 1.3, 1.4. And the actual total tax is what's more important, because the tax on a $4 million sale is going to be much higher as a dollar amount than as a percentage amount. So what ends up happening is the percentage becomes less important than knowing what the tax burden is for your client, which is what we're going to get into. But yeah, they've only been going up. Property taxes have only gone up.
Then based on the value of their house, they can be putting in a property tax which is less than other people.
Nah, property taxes are based on sale price. Let me get through the whole presentation and it'll be clearer. But generally speaking, it's the other way around. Generally speaking, the longer someone is in a property, the less they pay in taxes as a percentage of the value of their property than someone who buys. They applied every year. So each year you have your assessments. Okay. Anyway, don't worry about it. I'll work you through it. All we need to know as realtors is what's the bottom line? How much do they owe each year? And I'm going to get you there. But before we talk about that, let's talk about the tax year. The tax year is not the calendar year. It's not January to December, what that it was. It's July to June. Okay. Taxes are run from July to June. Now, here is what gets things really kind of confusing. The county has the job of determining how much each property should be taxed. They typically do that early in the new year, January, February, in most counties. But they don't send the bills to the homeowners for those taxes until the early fall. Okay, what could happen? Imagine what could happen between, say, February or even March and September with a property. What could happen to it? It could get sold, and that will impact the property taxes. But anyway, the tax bills are sent to the homeowner in early fall, and they are given whatever the total tax is, the ad valorem tax and the special assessments that get added together and divided into two bills. One bill, anyone here own their own homes? Okay, so he's seen a property tax bill because they get mailed to the homeowner. And there's usually two coupons on it that split the bill in half. And the first half of the bill is due November 1st and is considered late if it isn't postmarked by December 10th. And the second half of the bill is due February 1st and is considered late if it's not postmarked by April 10th. And if you do not use impounds, we were talking before about lender impounds. If we don't use those, then the homeowner has to pay these bills. Okay. And the homeowner has the first one due just like this, and they have to get it in, right? Otherwise, they're late. And the late penalties are steep. 5%. They're very high. However, if the homeowner has an impound account with their lender, they don't have to worry about this because their lender will be paying it out of the money the borrower's been paying every month. The idea of an impound account is you increase your monthly payment to your lender to cover the taxes for the whole year. So the money accrues in an account, it sits in an account and gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Then when the taxes are actually due, the lender pays this bill, both of these bills, and your borrower doesn't have to worry about it. So, okay. So we are just talking about impounds. Some home buyers with low down payment mortgages must pay their lender 1 month's worth of the annual property tax with their loan payment. So let's suppose the principal and interest was $5,000 a month. They might be making a payment of $5,500 or even $6,000 a month to cover the property taxes for 1/12. But the lender only pays the bill on that schedule I just showed you twice a year. Okay. If the borrower isn't required to pay the lender, then it's an option, and many homeowners choose to do it to save the hassle, right? And they call these impound accounts, the bank account. So the lender's legally obligated to separate the money so that you get a statement. When you get your bank statement for your mortgage, you see, here's how much I owe on the principal and interest. Here's how much principal is left. Here much is I'm paying an interest on the mortgage. And they have a separate section. Here's how much is in the impound account for the taxes.
Quick question. So what's the bank's, it looks like more management. What's the bank's motivation to do that?
You missed that part. We did that already. What's the bank's motivation?
Not ever have a tax lien.
That's right. The bank wants to do this with its low down payment borrowers because they are a bigger risk of foreclosure and they're a bigger risk in general. The bank is taking more risk by lending more percentage of the sale price. So since the bank is already lending a higher percentage of sale price, they want to cover that risk a little bit by making sure the property taxes get paid.
And taxes will always be the number one position.
Yes. So when a borrower, thank you for mentioning that. When a homeowner has a lien against the property, usually a mortgage lien, sometimes a mechanic's lien. If there is a tax lien, they get paid first. The state gets paid for, the county gets paid first before the lender, and the lender doesn't like that. They want to make sure in a case of a foreclosure, they get paid first. Yeah. So it's all about risk management for them. All right. We just did this. Why would a borrower choose to have an impound account? We've flogged that horse. Okay. All right. Before I answer this question, where do you get property tax information from for a property? Any guesses?
Alameda County office.
Yes. How would you do that?
Go to the website.
You go to their website. Yes, that's absolutely the most reliable source. Where else can we get property tax information?
Natural hazards disclosure usually has
thank you,
property
Liz.
tax.
Yes. So the listing agent will probably in the disclosure package have a document called a natural hazard disclosure, and it will have a fairly accurate representation of the anticipated property taxes. Thank you, Liz. All right. So there is also tax information on the MLS. On your MLS, you can get a tax information report that tells you about how much the owner paid in taxes in the last tax year and the previous 2 years before that. And then the NHD report, which we're going to talk a lot more about. Yeah, right, that's right. But remember, property tax info, I'm sorry, Charles, right? As Charles pointed out, property tax info is public information. You can put in any property address on the county website and see how much the person, what the property taxes were on that property. All right, so this is a report from one of the MLSs, a tax report from one of the MLSs that provides it. And you can see here it shows historical tax information going back many years of the total property taxes that the owner had due each year. And you can also see that how the changes was. And what you're noticing here, the percentage change, 2% from 2021 to 2022, 1% from 2020 to 2021. And those percentages are restricted by law. The maximum the county can increase property taxes is only 2% per year.
So sometimes we do see percentages higher than that.
Yeah, I would like to see that property. There may be, only reason I can think of is that the homeowner did a permitted change that added to the square footage of the property, thus changing the base. Taxes are based on a base value of land and a base value of improvements. So if during the year they change the base value of the improvement by doing a permitted change, it got filed, and it went from a 3-bedroom to a 4-bedroom house, the county might increase the tax more.
Just make changes to upgrade the house, in that case, the property gets, the assessment value goes up.
Not necessarily. It depends what they know about it, right? But not necessarily. It's far more square footage changes that impact that. Okay, you can read all about that detail on their website. The county tells you exactly when they can go above the 2%. Here's the important part. Most of the time, it only goes up by 2% max. That means it is falling behind property appreciation in the Bay Area. Because where we live, most of the time, not always, property values go up. And they usually go up by more than 2% a year over time. That's really important. We'll talk about that in a minute. All right. So this is a sample page from an NHD report, a Natural Hazard Zone Disclosure Report. I'm sorry, my big screen isn't working. So if you want to go on, watch someone else's or go on Zoom, you can, yeah. So this is a sample property tax page from an NHD report. Now, this report is great because you can, as a buyer's agent, when you're having a consultation with your buyer and you're saying, listen, you want to offer 1 million for this property. Here is we can just use this little formula that the seller gave us the NHD report. So we have it and have an idea of what their total taxes are going to be per year and what you're looking at each month if you pay an impound account. Very helpful. Now, do you guys notice something interesting? Estimated ad valorem tax. This is an example, a property I sold about 2 years ago. No, this isn't one of mine. This is another one. We were going to write an offer. We never did. So this is a report from 2023 on this property. And notice the ad valorem tax rate is only, 1,377. It's 1,377. That's a lot more than 1.1. That's what I was talking about, that creep before, right? Tax creep. And then the direct assessments add up to nearly $2,000 on this property. So you can look at this, and if you want, you don't have to do the math down at the bottom of the page. You can click the link and do it on the web portal of the hazard company. And nowadays, there's lots of websites where you can do it. Yeah, line 2. Estimated ad valorem tax rate, 0.01377. So this is not expressed as a percentage, right? 0.01377 as a decimal is 1.377%. It's more, right? You don't see 1.1 anymore, or rarely. It's almost always more, okay? All right, and then this direct assessments aren't insignificant. $2,000 a year in direct assessments. That's flat rate, okay? Everyone with me? All right, so we're now going to do some math, I'm sorry. So what you see on your screens is $700,000 sale price. This is just, the green numbers are the calculations. Let's look at an example, right? 700,000. If the ad valorem tax is 1.377%, 1.0377, that means, and the direct assessments are 1988.08 from the previous page. Step 1, we take the sale price and multiply it by the ad valorem tax. That's $9,639. Step 2, we simply add in the direct assessments. That takes us to $11,627. So the tax rate as a percentage of the price is 1.66%. Now, if this were a $3 million property, that 1.66 would be lower. But it's interesting that, when they talked about Prop 13, they weren't talking about high percentages like this.
Assessed tax is in terms of an absolute figure, not.
That's right. It's an absolute figure every year. And we know from our property research that it was 1988.08 for this property at this time.
So it doesn't matter what is the square.
No, that part doesn't matter. It might matter. It might matter. Some of the laws that were passed to charge a premium special assessment might have been based on square foot. So it will be right down to the property. Okay. All right.
So that can be different for different neighborhoods.
Yeah, absolutely. Different houses on the same street. Absolutely. Yeah. Now, number 4, you take the total tax, 11,627.08 from step 2, you divide by 12 for each month of the year. And in this case, if the buyer pays 700,000 from the top of the page, their monthly tax rate is $968.92. Okay? But this is a very low property amount by today's purposes, right? That's a bargain by today's standards, right? But anyway, this is an example. So why do we care? Yes, of course. There's 2 parts of the property tax. There's the percentage part and then the flat rate part. I got it from the NHD report that I got from the seller in the listing package. Do you see it? Line 4 at the bottom. That's where I got it from. Okay. All right. So why do we care about the percentage tax rate? Here is why it's so important. Many lenders use 1.25% sale price when they're estimating a borrower's monthly payment. They just use 1.25%. Okay. They may use a slightly lower figure here in the very high cost area that we're in right now, but for the most part, they use 1.25%. Because they have to do estimates when they have a borrower trying to pre-qual them. This can be a problem. And it can be a problem because if the actual tax rate is 1.6% and the lender's estimate of the tax rate is 1.25%, then the monthly payment that the lender estimates is going to be too low than what it actually is going to be if your borrower buys it. Okay, so some lenders are a little sloppy about this. Some lenders are, when they estimate the affordability of your buyers, they don't factor in the true estimated tax rate. They use this 1.25 blanket rate, which causes a problem. Because now your borrower, when they actually get into contract, is suddenly going to see a much higher tax amount than they thought they were going to see, right? So you want to watch for that. The bottom line here is when you are working with a lender, especially one you don't know, make sure that they are basing your borrower's monthly tax cost, whether they have an impound account or not, on the true tax rate as revealed in the NHD report, not on some arbitrary estimate. Does that make sense? Any questions about it? Are you guys good on?
So the lender estimate is 1.25. The actual rate is 1.6, which is higher than 1.25.
That's right.
So can you repeat, please?
So if the lender estimates 1.25, when they figure out how much your borrower can borrow, they're going to have a figure at the tax. Oh, the borrower only going to have to pay $729.17 a month. But you've already calculated it based on the reality that it's actually going to cost closer to $970 a month. That means your borrower has to come up with over $240 more per month. That may be a showstopper. They may not have that money. This happens before you get into contract, right? Once you get into contract, the lender will use the right numbers. But when they're doing a pre-approval letter, they're doing a blanket pre-approval. Oh yeah, they can go up to $1.5 million. They're basing it on a standard estimate because they're not going to look at every single property you're going to show your buyer. The same way you don't look at disclosures for every single property your buyer goes to see at the open house, right? They're not going to look at everyone. They're going to say, okay, he's pre-approved to $1.5 million, right? But they're making an assumption about the tax rate. So you need to make sure before you write an offer that that your borrower's tax rate actual matches the estimate from the lender, that the borrower is still going to be able to do it. Basically, right? Because if it's off by $250, the borrower may not be able to afford the house anymore. They may have to make a lower offer.
I had put in an offer for a particular house, okay? And I put in an offer which is higher than what they accepted.
Right.
The quick answer was that my seller did not want to just accept an offer based on a pre-qualification. We needed
Absolutely, you need a pre-approval.
Already underwritten.
Okay, that's fine.
So
it would be the right rate. Yeah, if they've fully underwritten the offer, fully underwritten is not, well, it may be. So the question is, if a lender provides a guarantee that the buyer's pre-approval has been fully underwritten, does that mean they got the tax rate right? And the answer actually is no, because it's only true if the lender's underwriter had the property address. But if the lender's underwriter did not have the property address when they provided assurance of fully underwritten, then they're using a base rate. They may not be using the actual rate. That's a question for your loan officer, right? All right, I'm going to move on. Okay. I want to talk about supplementals because they muddy the waters even further. Supplemental property taxes are an extra tax expense for buyers, potential extra tax expense for buyers in their first year or two of ownership. So when do you get supplementals? When the previous owner's tax burden, the seller, is less than the new owner's tax burden, right? Usually when the new owner is paying more than the previous owner paid. Okay, so it's caused by a delay in the county assessor office catching up with the ownership change. All right, so I'm going to walk you through this. You don't need to figure out the number yourself. You can use the NHD report and run a calculator, and it'll tell you if there are any special assessments and how much it's going to be. What your job is as a buyer's agent is to warn your clients that they should expect an extra tax bill in the months after they buy their property, called a special assessment. So it's not a surprise. There are a number of ways you do this. You can send them the CAR advisory on supplemental property taxes. You can point out the section in the statewide buyer and seller advisory about this. You can send them an email about it. But if they are going to be subject to supplemental property taxes, you want to have that conversation with them because people aren't ready for it. And 3 months after they buy the house in October, and in January, they get an extra tax bill that their lender won't pay. Oh, this is a supplemental. You have to do that now.
So this is the same as the assessment tax, special assessment tax, the supplemental.
No, it's nothing to do with direct assessments or special assessments. It's called a supplemental property tax. It's a different thing. It happens because of the lag. It's a time lag issue. Let me see if I have okay, so this is the form where you can figure it out. Okay, so you put in the estimated sale price, you know the current assessed value from the last person's taxes, and you can subtract the two. So if you're buying it for 700,000, you take out the 100,000, and then you multiply by the formula. But you don't have to do any of that stuff. You can just click on the link at the top. It'll tell you if your borrower owes special assessments or not. Why are there special assessments? Because the tax people do all their calculations in January, but don't send out the bills till the fall. So if the property changes hands in the middle, the taxes are off. The important thing is you want to warn your buyer it's going to happen, right?
What is?
It is a catch-up tax. So imagine that they buy the house so remember, the county figures out the taxes for the year based on ownership in January or February, right? So they look and see it's still owned by Mr. Smith. Taxes are based on Mr. Smith who bought it 30 years ago. It's $2,000 a year, okay? Your buyer buys it in March or April. They get a credit from the seller because they only owe, the tax year ends in June. The seller has to pay them only to the end of close of escrow. They're only on the hook for a certain part till the end of June, but the seller paid for the whole 6 months. But it's based on the seller's price. So going forward, the county will not be figuring out the buyer's new taxes until the following January. So they get way behind. So when your buyer pays their first tax bill that following year, it's based on the old one. And it creates a huge discrepancy, and your buyers get upset if they don't know. So you want to warn them. How do we warn them? Number one, you give them this zip form. It's right from Zip Forms. And it talks about it here. Now, this doesn't really explain anything about how it gets calculated and why it happens, but it's a start. The other thing you can do is share with them page 11, number 8 on the statewide buyer and seller advisory form. where it talks about the supplemental taxes a little bit more. Okay. And again, this is all a timing issue. So once you get past the first or second year and the county catches up, they only owe what they thought they were going to owe. But they have to play catch up because the county will often not reassess until long after they've started incurring a cost of property taxes. All right. So does anyone on the Zoom have questions about this? I know it's a bit of a confusing issue. Does anyone online have a question about this supplementals before we go to the next thing? That's really the hardest thing. It gets easier from here. Okay, so I want to talk about transfer taxes. Transfer taxes are a kind of property tax, but these are administered only at time of sale. They are flat one-time fee at time of sale. They're not ongoing. They don't go with the property. They go with the sale. And a county transfer tax is pretty standard across the board all over the Bay Area at $1.10 for each $1,000 of transferred value. So if it's a $700,000 sale price, the tax would be $770. In many counties of the Bay Area, the custom is that the seller pays all of that. Is it true here? And is it true in this county too? Anyone in the audience? Is it true? Yeah, what's her name? Helen. Helen, you've put in lots of offers. You're a more experienced agent, right? Does the seller pay county transfer taxes here? Oh, okay. In San Francisco, does the seller pay the county transfer tax?
Second loan with the San Francisco City, so
it works differently again? Okay, this is only for East Bay Peninsula. This is not for City of San Francisco. I can speak with confidence about the East Bay. Everywhere in the East Bay, it's the seller pays it, and it's, well, except for one city, almost everywhere in the East Bay, the seller pays all of this county transfer tax, and it's typically $1.1, $1.10 for each $1,000. So you take the sale price, divide by 1,000, and you divide it by 1,000 and then multiply it by 1.1, and you get the 770 here. In Alameda County and Contra Costa County, where some of my viewers are watching this, it's almost always paid by the seller, except in the city of Alameda. In San Mateo and Santa Clara, where I am sitting right now, maybe it's different. How would you find out what the closing cost is for county transfer taxes in San Mateo County? Any guesses? How would you find out? Title company? What else? How about this, guys? You open up a Google sheet, Google, and you ask, what is the county transfer tax in San Mateo County? And it will tell you it's $1.10. $1.10 for every $1,000 of transfer value. Okay, that's the seller side. But sadly, this is only one of the two of them. There's another one. Does anyone have an idea who else does transfer taxes? Counties do it. Who else does it? Cities. Cities do it. Some cities have a transfer tax. Some cities don't have a transfer tax. It is typically split between buyer and seller, but not always. It's a completely negotiable item. You'll see it on on the car contract. It's a separate line item. It's paid as a closing cost through escrow. Yes.
Incorporated and incorporated.
And unincorporated. Oh, that's a great question. That's a great question. So if a city has an unincorporated area, that means there is no city transfer tax. It's only county. We see that a lot. So a person lives across the street from somebody, and the buy across the street is in the city, and they have an outrageous city transfer tax. Sometimes they get very expensive, like in Berkeley and Oakland, for example. But then across the street, they're in unincorporated county. They still get all their utilities from the city guys, the utility, water and sewer and garbage and all that stuff, but they don't pay a city transfer tax. And it can be tens of thousands of dollars. It can be very expensive. So the city transfer tax is your business when you're writing an offer for a buyer or representing a seller to know if the property is subject to a city transfer tax. How would you find out? How would you find out if it's subject to a city transfer tax?
So if I go to the,
Yeah, God, you can ask title, but the much easier way nowadays is simply to ask Mr. Google, what is the city transfer tax in Palo Alto? So what is city transfer tax? Palo Alto, 33%.
It takes you to something called a VWAP, don't you think?
9.13%. No, that's sales tax. Sorry. City transfer tax. Yeah, yeah. You're right. 1.2. No, that's not what we want. But the title company will help, but also your calculator, it may be on the Natural Hazard Disclosure Report too. But anyway, whatever it is, the title company can do it. So if you don't want to use Mr. Google, Old Republic Title, if you go title company and you go to rate calculator, it should give you, it should give us, oh, really? It should give us the ability to figure this out. Let me try it this way. Old Republic Title Transfer Tax Calculator. Here we go. So here's Old Republic. It's one of the companies. And I'm going to their calculator, and the property is in San Mateo County, right? We're in San Mateo. Is that where we are? Or Santa Clara? Santa Clara, sorry. And then the property city is Palo Alto. And the sale price, say, is at 700,000. No, not 70,000, 700,000. No, okay. Well, I just wanted to keep an example. Okay, all right. Okay, let's just make it 1 million. It'll be easier to calculate. Yeah. And then we click submit. And the result is the seller's paying, it's very low. City transfer tax is only $231. Yeah, that's the county one. Yeah. 77 and 231. That's very low. That's a very low transfer tax. Yeah, but no, the gross number is very low, only $231. Well, let me show you what I mean. If we go to Oakland, we go to Alameda County, and we put in Oakland, that same $1 million property, watch the difference. Oh, come on. Alameda County, where's Oakland? Alameda County, property city, Oakland. Watch this. $15,000 and $1,100. So your property taxes seem low, unless it's a mistake on this form. Anyway, you can always look it up. The point is, you have a responsibility for your buyers and your sellers to know if city transfer tax is applying. Yes.
If you want a good example, is the Santa Clara County. If you check on San Jose, the property tax, usually it's 1.46.
1.46%. That's a lot. But you're talking about the property tax. I'm talking about transfer tax. That's not, yeah. 1.46. Wow. Yeah. And this is another argument why to use a local lender. Your buyer comes with you and he's working with Rocket Mortgage, some guy in Indianapolis, or some broker, a friend of his in Bakersfield. They have no clue about these property tax rates that are so high in the Bay Area and transfer taxes. So that's why having a local person impresses the listing agent. And you as a listing agent, if you have a buyer who comes to you with an offer from some lender that is clearly not local, that raises a question. Do they really understand the true tax implications here? Anyway, let's get back. We only have 10 minutes left. So let me get back into our presentation because we're nearly done, but we do have a few more things to talk about. All right. Prop 19. Has anyone here ever heard about Prop 19? Prop 19 is about 5 years old now, 3, 4, 5 years old. Prop 19 was a very big piece of tax legislation that passed that allows people who are 55 years or older who own property or who are disabled to keep their property tax base. It allows them to keep their property tax base when they sell their principal residence and buy a new property.
So if you're the same, can be of any age.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I don't know how they figure that out. But I don't think so. Anyway, the important part about this is a huge money issue. If your buyer bought their home, if your seller is worried about moving because their property taxes from their 20-year-old house is only $3,000 a year, and they're older now and they want to downsize, this Prop 19 might protect them from having a huge increase in their property taxes because prices have gone up so much. Possibly. Now, you are not to start going and figuring out how much the savings is, because it gets very complicated. You know, like most laws, there's a lot of ifs and ands and question marks about how you calculate it and who is eligible. So what I put in the presentation is a link to the Prop 19 for Alameda County, but you can look at the link for your own county. There's a website that is offered by Chicago Title to estimate property taxes, and that might be helpful. But at the end of the day, if you have a client who asks you about Prop 19 or you recommend they look into Prop 19, come with a CPA referral and have them talk to and give them your CPA, or give them a referral to several CPAs, or have them talk to their own to figure out how they could benefit. You can take advantage of the Prop 19 up to 2 years, I think it is, after you sell. You don't even have to do it. You can do it either direction, retroactively or forward. So it's a very powerful benefit for this group. People 55 or older, or people who are disabilities. Okay.
But they had to move to the same county?
No, that went away. That's the way it used to be. But since Prop 19, anywhere in the state. Only California. Now, if they move out of California, they're out of luck. It's only California. Yeah, yeah. Okay. All right. Now, that was pretty intense, right? Does anybody have any questions? There's something in chat. How many times can you do that? Svetla, you're talking about Prop 19. I would check. I think there is a limit of how many times you can actually use the thing, but I don't know what it is. But you can do it more than once in your life, right? I think the Prop 19 benefit could be used several times. But keep in mind, Svetla, that if the owner is moving too many quickly, there's no benefit, right? I mean, if they're over 55 or they're disabled and they move this year and then they move next year and then they move the year after, they won't have accumulated any tax benefit by having stayed in the place long enough for the property taxes to have risen, that their purchase price, the market may not have risen enough for it to make a difference, right? 1 year, maybe. I mean, if we get into hyper price inflation in the housing market again, potentially. But the biggest savings from Prop 19 are going to be people who've been in the property since before 2020 and earlier, because prices have been, well, it depends. Again, it's all location specific. But if you have a client interested, you have to take into account what they paid for the property, because that's where their property tax base comes versus what they are going to have to pay for the property they replace it with. So, for example, if you have a client who paid $700,000 for their property and there were no reassessments or changes, and now they're going to sell it and buy another property worth $700,000, there may not be a lot of tax benefit from Prop 19. Anyway, that was a great question, though. Does anyone else have any other questions? All right. So what you see on the screen now is a QR code. And with this QR code, you can request from my assistant a copy of this presentation's PowerPoint slides with all the links in it. And that might be helpful for you to look at and to do further research. Plus, this is obviously being recorded on my YouTube channel, and it's available for rewatching. Property taxes are complicated. What is important for us as realtors to know is we need to tell our buyers to understand how they work in terms of how it's going to impact their monthly payment, how it's going to impact their affordability, how the transfer taxes work, which can be a very expensive closing cost. All those things, and how supplementals work. Yeah. All right, that's it. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for watching on YouTube. Understanding Property Taxes is the name of the class. That's right. All right. Thank you, everybody.